Welcome back to Brainwave Exchange. This is episode 4 and also part 2 of Peak Discussion. Bringing back Anthony Torres. Welcome back, Anthony, both to the podcast and also welcome back from your vacation.
Thanks, Jason. It's good to be home. After a long journey, it's always good to be back in your own house.
Sure is. Bet you need a vacation from your vacation, right?
Yeah, a staycation. I
Yeah,
need to
there
not
you
go
go.
anywhere.
So I understand that while you were away, you had a little bit of downtime and you did some work on the mobile version of PQ. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes, what we talked about last time was a little bit too complicated for people, and so I'm trying to split it up into 3 separate things. And over the past week or so, I was focusing on the journal component of PQ.
I hope you didn't take up too much time of your vacation working on this.
No, actually, once the kids went to bed, I had some energy I needed to expend on some building activity, and so yeah, what you'll see is handful of hours of work.
All right. Let us get into the demo. Let's bring in. Okay. So what we can see here now is the mobile journal screen. So this is running on an iPhone.
This is running on my iPhone. That's right.
All right. Talk us through what you've done.
Okay, cool. So if you remember the old journal, in the one in episode 2 where we show the desktop version, the point of the weekly check-in is so that once you have your goals and your behaviors that you want to focus on it each week and make sure you continuously do those things, the journal is broken up into the quantitative things, the metrics, and then also the qualitative things like the just free-form thoughts, the notes. And so what I did is I took the desktop version of the journal, I moved it to mobile, and trying out this new Retool mobile capability set, comparing it with the desktop, and just kind of seeing how it works. So what you see here is just a list view of journal entries. Cadence is my daughter. She was believe it or not, she actually helped me figure out a couple of bugs I had and made this work. So it was really exciting for her to see. We went into the app, we clicked a few things, and then she could see like the results of that. She wrote, Cadence and Daddy, and then let's click on that entry. And in here, you can see I have the metrics, and then I have the thoughts to share. So that's the same as the desktop version. Something I wanted to call out, part of the reason why I built this at all was we were doing weekly check-ins on Google Sheets. And I don't know how many of you have tried using Google Sheets on mobile, but there's a reason I built this. Let's put it that way.
It's not good.
Right. And so in Retool, when I did this, the desktop version of the journal, it was an improvement over Google Sheets because I had like a form and you could type in your numbers, none of this weird like double click and make sure you hit the function button so you can anyway, you get it.
Yep.
But the problem I still had with the desktop version, even though it was responsive and it could render on a phone and fit on the screen, was it was designed for desktop. There's a lot of padding. You got modal dialogues. They have extra padding. And then so by the time you get to the content, it's smashed kind of in the center of the screen. And so when I ended up going this mobile route, now the components, it's native. That actually some quirk on the desktop one was when you go to edit a date, it's kind of clunky. But now if we go in here, and we want to add a new entry, like this has got a native calendar, so let's say we want to do, what's today? It's the 3rd, confirm, right? And then the other thing that's really cool, the desktop version did not have the photo capability, but Retool has like a photo input thing that is super easy to use. There's all my messy wires, but you can flip the camera around. There's me. And I'll take a picture. Yeah, that's a great looking photo.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So we'll say use photo, and then the metrics here. You put in your numbers. Unfortunately, one of the differences between the desktop version and the mobile version is they don't have this JSON form builder in the mobile version. And so I had to get clever with how I do this. And so I figure I'll just do some freeform text with basic text input validation. So for example, oops, I clicked the wrong thing. If you were to, oh, it's in Spanish. Sorry. I was in Costa Rica. So there's that. If we put in like a D or so, oh, what's it doing? Oh, I wonder if it's repainting all the time. Right here, like I do some basic form validation, must look like a number. And then another thing I had to do was, that's really weird. I'm not sure why it's doing that, but I'll figure that out later. Is if you were to like type a metric that wasn't one that you had configured, it like checks them and makes sure that the labels you have match the metrics you said.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the JSON form builder, I got to skip all that. So the vast majority of my hours spent building the mobile version was doing form input validation. Anyway, let's keep going. You got your thoughts to share, your thoughts to keep. It's the same as the desktop version. We'll just say foo here, right? And we'll hit save. And then if everything works well, which hopefully it does, let's see if it's in here. You know how live demos go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know what broke. Oh, I wonder if it's this. So something I was going to tell you later, but maybe it's going to be a problem right now, is there's a weird thing with how functions are deployed to mobile. If I were to have done this on the browser version, it would have worked. So I don't know, Jason, whether we want to move over to that or whatever, but we can talk about that when we get into the technical section later. But that's the gist of it. I mean, you've basically seen the whole thing. There's a list view. There's you click on an entry. If you attach a photo, I actually render the photo. Supposedly, I don't know where it is right now. Come on, there it is.
Here it is.
There it was. I think what's happening in the background is it's doing refreshing more than it needs to. Like I said earlier, I put a handful of hours into this just to get something out the door and see whether or not it hit the mark. So
yeah, and it's important for the viewers to keep in mind that we're showing progress. We're not showing a finished product here, right? We're trying to show the steps along the way, bring you all along for the ride. So this is part of that journey. That's how it works. Things aren't going to be perfect after you spend 10 hours getting a demo going.
Right. Yep. And there's definitely some quirks that show up on the device itself that don't show up on the desktop version. So that's some stuff that I'll work through and hopefully we can provide some insight on that, like how we solve those problems.
And are you able to share to the Slack channel from the mobile app?
So short answer, yes. Longer answer is I haven't hooked it up yet, but it's the same resource that I use in the desktop version. So I just literally have to move it to the mobile app and it'll work the same.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that if you see the little megaphone on the bottom right, the intent is actually, I don't know what happens if I click it. Yeah, I didn't hook it up yet. But it'll behave just like the desktop. It'll say, do you want to share to Slack? And something that I'm excited to build is we are in PQ. You can be a part of different groups. And so you might share certain things to group A and different things to group B. And it depends on who needs to see what. So I'm in one of those situations where I can choose to share to the accountability group that I have with you or with just the PQ channel at large. And this will support both of those.
Very cool.
All right, I'm going to drop out on my phone.
Yep, we'll swap this back. So that's a nice little brief view of the work you've done there on the mobile app. For those of you who are interested, you can stick around. We're going to get into a little bit more of the technical details of the work that Anthony did on this. If that isn't quite your cup of tea, you can feel free to drop off now. Obviously, we'd love to have you stay for the whole thing. but I understand if you're not really interested in the technical nitty gritty. But either way, if you're enjoying the content, we'd love it if you like the video, if you subscribe, hit that little bell, get your notifications. We'd love to see you around. Now we're going to get into a little bit of the technical details of how Anthony built this mobile journal. So
All right.
So we are here now in Retool. So take it away, Anthony.
Cool. So just to get you acquainted with Retool at the highest level, you've got a canvas, you've got a library of functions, queries, transformers. You've got like the details of all of the transformers, and then you've got an inspector for your canvas. I am trying to figure out something looks a little funky to me, and I'm not sure if it's because I'm screen sharing or not. Like this all is cut off, and I'm gonna see if I can figure out why that is. But so let's just basically start with, you've got your different screens. And then for each screen, you have components. And the desktop and the the mobile version behave a little bit differently. On the desktop, you can drag and drop components basically on a grid. On the mobile version, it's top down or left to right. And so you can see, like, I can't actually make this thing be full height with these buttons at the bottom. It takes up as much height as it takes up, and it stacks from top to bottom. I've got some questions out on the forums for like ways to make it so that this would be, like a flex box where it's 100% height, and this takes up as much space as it needs to at the bottom, and then whatever else can fit above it is what shows up on screen. But for now, I think this is still pretty good. So I've got a list. And then within each list, so I got to figure out, let's just do that for now. You have a query, and I'll go back to that in a second. And then for each query, you link the list to the query, and then you could, this is pre-configured as part of the list component. You can title things, you can give it some text, you can give it a thumbnail, and there's a bunch of media options you can change, but I'm just gonna, read the docs if you want to see what the list you can do. And then you've got some event handlers. So what happens when I hit the list? We can start, and Jason, if there's anything you actually want me to dive into, please interrupt and I will show you. But I'm kind of going from the entry point.
Yeah.
Deeper. Okay, so to load this page, we just run a query against the database. Have a thing called metrics entries, which is my legacy name for the journal before it turned into what it did. But here's a database, some cool stuff. You can see the fields, you can see the date, the metrics. Oh, look, even tells you the types, right? So metrics are JSON, notes are text, that sort of thing. I do a query to get some number of results, and I wanted to make sure that you don't overwhelm the browser. So I do server-side pagination. You only fetch what you need to display. Future state, these should not be in here, but good enough to prove a point.
Yep.
So that gets me the list. Here's a fun little, I don't know if you want to call it a quirk. It's an implementation detail that I had to come up with. So when you upload a photo, I need to put that photo somewhere. I chose to use Google Cloud Storage to house the photo, but I don't want those available to the public internet. So my bucket has a policy that says you can't view the photos unless you have the credentials of the service account who's asking for the information. In order to get those photos, I need to generate signed URLs as the app, which I didn't want, if this was, imagine it had 10 items on it, then I'd have to make 10 calls to make 10 signed URLs for every user of the app, and it just felt yucky.
Yeah.
So I had the idea to basically store, if you look here, I've got a thumbnail. And what it is a base 64 representation. I downsampled it to be, about as big as this box here. And I save that right in the database, like as text. And then what that lets me do is skip having to generate signed URLs. But if you want the high quality image, when you click here, this is where I actually generate the signed URL and fetch the raw file.
That's a pretty cool solution to that problem.
What was real weird but fun is, how do you downsample a raw image? If you base 64 encode this byte string to a string, it's going to be at the size of the original image.
Mm-hmm.
So how am I supposed to do that? Well, I found some Stack Overflow post, how all engineers work, right?
Yep.
Where is it? Let me find it. Get signed URL. I have to remember where it is. Generate thumbnail here. And what I do is I actually make an off-screen canvas and then attach the image to the canvas. And then, so notice that the canvas is actually set to some size, which I just called 64, right? And then I load the image onto the canvas, and then I say, hey, what's the base 64 version of that thing instead? And that spits out if you go look at, if you take actually, I think we can do this. Something else I'm using, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here. Something else I'm using is the Retool database, which we could do a whole episode on this because this thing is wonderful. But in the database, let's see, we want to make sure I'm in staging. And here we can take this image, and then they have a base 64 image viewer. And you can actually paste it here to check what it, so you can see that string, which is quite large, but
we can't see what you're doing. We lost you somewhere.
No. Oh, I'm sorry. Here. How's that?
There we go.
So I found this base 64 image viewer. You can find it on Google, and you paste your string in here. So what I was doing as I was debugging this thing is taking the results from that transformer that I shared and pasting in here, making sure it looked about what I was expecting.
Very nice.
So share this tab. So now we're back to the mobile app. You can see that all right?
Yes.
So I'm trying to think of some other fun stuff that I had to figure out while I was building this. Beyond the list view and the details view. So I told you there's like click handlers, view entry action, and all it does is trigger this query, which navigates between pages, and it sets the selected item. That way I know what thing to show on the resulting details page. Here we got an edit button. Oh, okay. So let's talk about this one right here. This metrics. This took some work. So because I didn't have the JSON form, I had to generate, I have to do that somehow. They have the Retool component has they have like a key value pair component, which is kind of nice, but it's not editable. So I had to come up with my own way to do this. Within the metrics tab, you can see a couple of things. First thing is the default value. So if I were to, let's just discard. Are you sure I want to discard this entry? Yeah, we'll make a new one. Something I must not have done is cleared the old form values when you leave, because this should be empty to start, and it's not. But this map value, map metrics to text. In the database, I have all of the metrics that you selected. Metrics to text. Right, so it pulls all the metrics, and then splits them into a string, and then makes them look like what you see. But these, it starts off. Yeah, I have to disable that. That's driving me crazy. It starts off like this for a new entry.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point was you should be able to click this row, type a number, click, and I try to make it as frictionless as possible to switch between them, drop your number in, and then move on. The problem I had was the mobile app uses the same database table as the desktop app. So all my legacy, or I shouldn't even call them legacy, all my old journal entries will just work in the new version. So I have this column that's of type JSON, and I need to honor that, and it needs to behave, like the desktop version does. So I had to do a bunch of validation, because if I try and write some garbage to the database that either isn't JSON or behaves differently from the desktop version, then when you go to the desktop version, everything's going to look weird. So I ended up writing this validate metrics text thing, which is using a combination of regex matching. It's also using regex groups to look at your keys and your values and make sure that the keys exist in the active metrics. But this allows me to do all sorts of cool stuff. Like I even made it, I really gotta fix that. If you put like a thing that kind of looks like a number but isn't, I check for that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cool thing about how Retool works is for all those use cases where the component that they have doesn't quite work the way you want, between the custom validation rules, the transformers, and the triggers, you can more or less get pretty close.
Yeah, that's really cool. Can you roughly estimate how many lines of actual code you had to write for this? For the whole thing?
All the code is, let's call it, I don't know, under 1,000, probably under 500 lines of code. Like none of these are even 100 lines.
Yeah.
So call it 500 lines of code.
That's probably even still overestimating.
For sure.
Yeah, that's quite a cool testament to the low code nature of Retool. That, I mean, yes, you have to understand how to write these transformers and actions if you need them, but it's a couple hundred lines of code and that's it. You don't have to worry about writing the components and figuring out any of the normal things you'd have to figure out if you're writing a native app for the iPhone in Swift, let's say.
Right. I think it's the right mix of, it's not no code, it's low code.
Right.
I actually prefer low code because it's like in the common case, it's no code. And when you want something different, you have an escape valve.
Right.
And then I don't know how hard this would be to do in, not using Retool. But if I actually wanted this now on my phone, I literally just scan a QR code, click Retool, and then just 1 second, and it's like, there it is. So it's kind of hard to see. Oh, it's all washed out, but
yeah,
you get
the idea. Yeah.
So show me a faster way to write a mobile app than that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really cool. Now, you mentioned earlier that your daughter helped you solve a couple of bugs. Do you have an easy example of one of those that she helped you figure out?
I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I think it was the thoughts to share wasn't writing to the database. And the reason why was I had messed up my local storage event handler or something like that. And what was cool to show a kid, my daughter's 7. So she doesn't, I mean, she can read, but it's limited what she cannot read and understand and how much
Mm-hmm.
she can grok from all of this. But what I thought was really interesting to be able to do with her that I couldn't do, say, if I was writing this in VS Code, was to point to this thing on the screen and say, hey, look, this is called thoughts to share, and it's this box on the device. And you typed, and it was my other example where it was Cadence and Daddy, right? Like you typed Cadence and Daddy. And then if we look over here, we see this is the thoughts to share setting. So I made the connection between the configuration and what it is on the phone. And then I said, hey, look, we need a change handler so that when somebody types something in, we make this update. And I don't know exactly how much of that stuck with her, but at least it was very easy to explain.
Yeah, that is really cool.
I'm just thinking about how hard the equivalent of hey, here's some JSX you need to read,
Yeah.
and some React components. It would have been a non-starter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that can be hard for experienced engineers to grok on the fly.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's probably about all. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here, especially when I want to hook up the broadcast to Slack button.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
Yeah, how
for now,
much? Sorry, let me interrupt you. How much work do you think there is in hooking that up? And do you think that's something that we could try and do on the show?
I can probably estimate it maybe 10 minutes. You want to try?
We don't have to do it now. That can be a future. We don't want to. We don't want to bury the lead. Got to keep them coming back for more.
There you go.
But yeah, I think that would be kind of cool if we can do some live work on a simple feature. That'll also, I mean, we can sit here and we can talk about how simple some of this stuff is in Retool, but if we show it live, I think that'd be a really cool moment.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Oh, that makes a ton of sense. There's a couple of things I'll fix beforehand, like the auto refreshing. That got tedious. And then we can kind of do a live demo of, hey, here's how when you push the megaphone button, it shows up in Slack.
Be really, really cool. Anything else you want to mention here about the mobile journal before we wrap up?
I would like to get 10 people using this. You can see that it's definitely quirky. So if you're expecting it to be perfect, then please hold on for a little while. But if you're okay with things being clunky, I would like to get 10 people using this. I would like to get feedback on what you like, what you don't like, and if there's anything that you wish it could do, that would be very useful too. The goal here is it's intended to help you track consistent behaviors week over week. So if that sounds like you, then follow up and we'll get you on.
Very good. Yeah, and we will add in the show notes. You'll find the ways of reaching out to Anthony to get involved with this if it's something that sounds like you want to try. And I would encourage all of you to try it. It's absolutely useful for like I said, keeping track of consistent behaviors week over week, because consistency is king. It's making things a habit. Once you've made it a habit and it becomes sort of second nature to you, then you'll be able to keep making progress.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thanks again for joining us, Anthony. This is looking really cool, and I hope that those viewers here will stick around as we continue to make progress on refining PQ into a user-friendly showstopper of an app.
Love it.
All right. Thanks again, Anthony, and until next time, have a good one.
All right. Take care.